Hello, and welcome to the Producers Guild conversation with the producers of AMMONITE. We'd like to thank our friends at Neon and Perception PR for making this event possible. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator today. Jenelle Riley is an editor at Variety and a three-time Emmy Award winner as host and producer of PBS's Actors on Actors. Jenelle, welcome. Panelists, thank you so much for being here. Jenelle, please take it away.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for joining us at home. This film comes to us from director Francis Lee, who previously helmed God's Own Country. And at this time, please join me in welcoming two of the producers who helped bring this timeless movie to life, Ian Canning and Fodhla Cronin O'Reilly. Thank you so much for being here.
No, it's our pleasure.
Whenever I have people as accomplished as you are, I actually like to go back to the beginning and find out about people's sort of humble starts, or maybe not so humble. Sometimes people are working right out of the gate. But what was your first job as a film producer, or the first job in this business? You know, did you start off in a mail room and work your way up, or were you a producer right out of the gate?
Fodhla, do you want to go first?
Okay. My first job within the film industry, I worked in special effects. I was a trainee in special effects for a company called Team Effects, who are based in Ardmore Studios in Ireland. So I started out learning about pyrotechnics, atmospherics, and I think my very first job, I was a trainee special effects on a show called The Tudors with Jonathan Rhys.
Of course, yeah. So cool.
Yeah, I spent my summers working on TV shows like that, and then eventually I left Ireland, went to London, did my degree or master's in producing, and then my first producing role was on a feature film called Lady Macbeth, that I made about 5 years ago.
That was your first that's a great film right out of the gate. That's kind of impressive. These are not humble beginnings. This is really impressive, actually.
Well, thank you. That's very kind.
Ian, what about for you?
I actually got my first. I was brought up in the West Country, in a city called Bristol, and my first film job was in London, and I got that job because I couldn't drive and be a very effective runner where I came from, and needed to go to a place where I could get a job and not have to drive to do that job. So weirdly, that ended up being this thing, and it was a runner job at this company called Renaissance Films, and I only got that job because someone who had the job didn't show up for the first 3 or 4 days, and they had my contact number and called me up and said, can you start in a few days' time? So yeah, it was the heady lights of making sure the stationery cupboard was clean and tidy, and that I could make a good cup of tea.
I love that they gave that person 3 or 4 days to show up before calling you.
Okay.
You actually sabotaged that person, didn't you?
Yeah, where is that person? Whatever happened to them?
They're called Sam Mendes. No, I don't know.
So I want to start at the beginning with AMMONITE. Ian, you're also the managing director of Seesaw Films. How did you and the company come to be involved with this film?
So Emil Sherman and I run Seesaw, and I'd seen God's Own Country at a private screening in London, and just thought, my God, this is a real incredible filmmaker with a voice, and was telling different stories to what is traditionally told out of the UK, and that was incredibly exciting. And so I sort of met Francis sort of 2017, started talking to him about what his next project might be, and he had a few ideas at that point, and then he settled on AMMONITE and telling the story and sort of reimagining Mary Anning's life, and you know, we've had success within the dynamics of, you know, telling dramas that are you know, fictional in the way of Shame, or telling more kind of true stories in the way of King's Speech and Lion. And, you know, it seemed to combine a sort of real opportunity to reimagine, and also an opportunity to tell some amazing facts about Mary Anning's life. So that and Frances together seemed like a no-brainer for us.
And Fodhla, what was it about this story or this script or this project in general that spoke to you?
Well, so Ian sent me the script. I think you guys were at first draft when you sent it to me, so still quite early on in the process development wise. But I was just so taken with the love story between Charlotte and Mary, and also the world that Frances created. And it's something, that aspect, I loved that aspect of God's Own Country. I think Frances is a real skill at creating a sort of tactile, tangible aesthetic. You feel as if you can really touch those elements within the world he creates, and I really love that. And it was very apparent in his script that he had written. So yeah.
I'm a little embarrassed to admit I wasn't familiar with Mary Anning prior to seeing the film. Were either of you familiar at all with her story, or had you ever heard her name?
I was actually aware through sort of nieces about Mary Anning. It was through the fact that she had started to be brought up within the UK curriculum in terms of education. So I didn't personally, generationally have, you know, heard of her, and that was part of the fun of exploring that story. But it was actually through a younger generation of discovering her that was how I found out.
Yeah, embarrassingly, no, I didn't know of her before I read the script. And even more embarrassingly, 3 of my sisters are scientists. And I didn't know. That just sort of maybe highlights that I'm a terrible sister. But no, but to be fair, she was a British scientist, and we're Irish. So no, I read Frances' script. That's when I first learned of her. And then after reading the script, I delved into, you know, Google, trying to find out as much as I can about this super impressive woman that I didn't know anything of beforehand.
She's so impressive. I believe she was completely self-taught in paleontology.
That's right.
Yeah, she was. Her father set her off on that journey, but he passed away when she was quite young, and then she took over the family business, and then taught herself geology, and she was amazing.
And obviously we have to talk about this fantastic cast. You have Kate Winslet playing Mary Anning, and Saoirse Ronan as Charlotte Murchison. I mean, you can't get better than that. Where did you even begin? Did it start with Kate?
It did start with Kate, and it started with a very quick read from Kate. I don't think I've never experienced an actor read so quickly and come back so passionately on something. It was in a matter of sort of hours. Like, it was within the time that you could probably say someone got the script and read it and was able to respond. So I think Kate read it overnight, called Frances the next day and said, you know, I've got to do this. I've got to be Mary Anning. And then, you know, bringing Kate and Saoirse together in this film, this role, it was just. I think sometimes producers say it was a dream come true, but I think when you look at this material and look at those actors, and you just think, my God, it's really special to have brought them together on this. It's so rare you get your dream cast, and yeah, they were extraordinary and very quick and passionate.
And I mean, not just them, but you have Gemma Jones and Fiona Shaw. It's just a fantastic cast from top to bottom. It's really kind of stunning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's and within the dynamics of a small number of scenes, you know, Fiona comes in and has extraordinary presence within that, and Gemma and James. You know, Francis is a actor's director, and he had a wonderful group of people here that he was able to work with.
The film is set in 1840s England, and yet in so many ways it feels so vital and timely. How did you set about making a period piece that actually doesn't necessarily feel like one?
I think that's the, especially for US audiences, it's very rare that British film chooses a working class character as its central protagonist. You know, we've got a whole history of making films about kings and queens, but we very rarely go into the kind of dirt and mud and truth of real working class lives. And I think Francis was very keen to do that. So it's got that kind of punk feeling to it already, and you add into that the kind of, you know, the mud in the fingernails and the climbing up the cliffs and those sort of dynamics, and you know, the world and the romance and the love that we're exploring during the time. It just felt so fresh and raw and sort of vital. So it was refreshing as a UK producer. You're sent a lot of period dramas, but to actually develop one that has that sort of contemporary spirit to it was a rare find.
It was also treating the working class folk with respect, because usually in period film, working class people they're depicted in dirt and squalor, but we wanted to treat them with respect, and they actually take pride in their home, they take pride in their work. So that was really important to Francis as well.
Well, Mary Anning does get into the dirt, but it's by choice.
Yeah.
While she's searching for stones. And I understand you actually shot on location at Lyme Regis, which is where Mary Anning did live.
Yeah, she grew up and lived in Lyme in Dorset, and she worked. Yeah, so we shot on the beaches that she fossiled, and again, it was very important to Francis that we did that. Yeah, and it was quite a challenge because of the Dorset, around that area, that coastline is known as the Jurassic Coast. And the reason it's such a prime location for fossils is because it's unique geology. But as a consequence, the coastline it's eroding quite dramatically. Surprisingly so. So that was one of the biggest challenges of shooting in and around that area.
It looks like maybe it hasn't changed in the almost 200 years since this story is set.
It's well, it's shifting, but I think, you know, the general sense of, you know, the streets and the formations of the area and Lyme and where her shop was is sort of, it has that same sort of feel to it when you're walking around. It was because we're a British, you know, independent film, but you sort of you move into a place like Lyme and you suddenly become Hollywood for everybody there. And there was, I remember having breakfast in the hotel one morning, and we were the sort of talk of the breakfast room about how this Hollywood group of people had come in to start making this story about this local woman. So it was it was nice to be able to take that sort of legend of that you know, that community and then bring it to the screen.
And I'm guessing Mary is kind of a hometown hero there.
Very much so.
Very much so. You mentioned this is an independent film budget, and yet the production values on this movie are so stunning, from the costumes and locations to the hair and makeup. How did you go about achieving such authenticity from top to bottom and doing so on a budget?
Well, to begin with, it was about bringing on the right team members. So for costume, we fell madly in love with Michael O'Connor, who's just this extremely talented costume designer, and his speciality is the period we're set in. So he brought immense knowledge and expertise to that department. And the same with our other heads of departments. So Sarah Finlay, our production designer, hadn't yet tackled this period, but she was just willing to throw herself into it. And it was especially challenging for that department because Francis's process, he's always pursuing authenticity, and so as a consequence, each department, especially the art department, need to source props that are hopefully original to that period, or if not, have a story that is specific to the world we're trying to create. So yeah, I mean, all our HODs threw themselves into it and pulled off sort of the impossible, really.
And also getting that detail right, and getting, we were, Michael was faced with a costume dynamic where it was like, it's not that Mary Anning in every single different scene has a new dress. It's got to be appropriate for the fact that she would have something to wear, but the intricacy, the way they made all of those costumes with such, to be period specific, and also help lift the film and land the film in terms of its themes, was really beautifully done.
Was the weather as rough as it looked? I don't know if that was special effects or, intentional, or it just looked like really, really rough weather.
We did not need special effects in this film. It was that rough. That was the Dorset weather for you. But yeah, Kate was amazing. She really threw herself into it. She was totally up for climbing those cliffs and getting covered in mud, and yeah, her and Saoirse were just they were amazing. But yeah, again, it was such a volatile environment to shoot in, but our crew were just really freaking brilliant.
It's a brave person to go into those choppy seas. And although it was sort of amazing as their relationship evolved, the sun started to break through. It was very strange to sort of feel that, and it had no reason season-wise to start breaking through, but it sort of weirdly started to follow the romance of those characters.
So that really was Kate climbing those cliffs, because it looked like her, but at the same time, I was like, you can't have your Oscar-winning star scaling cliffs in this movie.
You couldn't have stopped her. You couldn't have stopped Kate from doing that.
No, she climbed that cliff. She did.
Yeah. Wow. You're making a period piece on location. You mentioned the weather was rough. For each of you, what ended up being the biggest challenge of making this film? It could be something logistical or, something emotional.
Ian?
I think, for us, the biggest challenge, I guess, in some ways, was stopping everybody filming our film before the film had been filmed by us. Because we were this, Kate Winslet, Saoirse Ronan, all of their following online, all of the interest in this project and the roles and their romance, we felt like we had 18 different phones from tourists trying to capture us at the time. So I think trying to find a space for Frances and the actors to be in character, to be in that world, which was so important to Frances and them, provided some challenges, and one specific one, Fodhla, wasn't it, in terms of how there was a particular scene where there might have been some nudity and intimacy between them.
There was, we were meant to, we were gearing up to shoot a scene that had possible nudity in it. We didn't know at the time, and so that was due to be filmed on a beach, a public beach that anyone could access, and we had so many paparazzi chasing us, so we had to figure out a way to safeguard Kate and Saoirse while we shot that film. So we sourced a secret beach that could only be accessed via the water, and on the day of filming, we didn't tell our cast or crew where it was exactly. We actually had a fake address on our call sheet, which because we knew the paparazzi were somehow getting their hands on our call sheet, and I didn't figure that out. So we sent out this call sheet with a fake address and sent the paparazzi to an entirely different location. And then we shipped our cast and crew to this secret beach. And yeah, we were able to film the scene in a way that we felt as, yeah, we were protecting Kate and Saoirse.
And it is really one of the most tender and loving scenes in the whole film. So it was really worth going to the trouble of safeguarding those moments.
Wow, that's fascinating. That's like something you wouldn't have even thought of, I would say, like 10, 15 years ago, but now probably something you have to deal with on a regular basis.
We didn't think so either, but we did have to deal with that, yeah.
It was really fun figuring it out. It was.
I want to talk some more about Francis Lee, because you mentioned he's an actor's director. He also just has such a beautiful visual eye. As producers, what do you feel is sort of your job in working with the director? Do you try to be more hands-off? Do you try to give them everything they want? Obviously, there's probably some things that you can't accommodate. Sort of where do you find that line?
I think it's that balancing act between, you know, having a certain amount of money, but wanting to facilitate the best environment to create the best work, really. And sometimes those things can feel absolutely at odds. But I guess it's the producer's job to just try and, through your own knowledge and experience, just try to help and support that creative process. And I think that's it, really. It's really about allowing the sort of performance and the acting space to be really special, and try and take away, where possible, as much anxiety and stress, so that can happen in an organic way.
I know the movie isn't a biopic per se of Mary Anning. It's I heard a good word for it, reimagining, perhaps, and a love story. But what do you hope this does for her legacy? Like I said, I was not aware of who she was before, and now I'm utterly fascinated.
I think it really the one thing that we really wanted to be really true to was how extraordinary she was within the dynamic of her work, and I think the film really does celebrate the sort of achievements that Mary Anning made in the time, how extraordinary it was for her not to be more recognized within the time, and really cement her place in people's hearts in terms of achieving those things, and having a piece of her work in London in the museum, and I think that was really super important. I think then to lace through a romance that gave her a private life, that explored that side of her life, was an element that could connect us to her, that could open up her heart within the story of the film. And so I think it hopefully really weaves those two things together, while very much at the forefront, celebrating her work, and celebrating her work for future generations to discover.
Fodhla?
In terms of Mary Anning, and yeah, no, when I first started talking to Ian and Francis about the project, I asked them why did they create why they created a love story between Mary and a woman. I was so curious about that. And Francis said that throughout his research, he had read multiple letters from women to women that felt quite romantic, but he took from that, he really wanted to create a relationship that was worthy of Mary, and he felt as if that could only happen if it were with another woman rather than a man, especially where he felt as if she was a victim of the patriarchy and stripped of the accolades she should have received and the recognition and whatnot. And I felt, yeah, that really resonated with me, I have to say.
And the story of Ammonite kind of making it sort of reflects how things have changed for women, because I understand you not only have all these great female actors, but quite a number of your crew was female as well.
Yeah, very much. Over half our crew were female. Yeah, and to be honest, to begin with, it was you know, we set out to hire the best people for the roles, and they happened to be women. Our entire, except for the DOP, our entire camera department were female. And so during the filming of more intimate scenes, Kate and Saoirse said they felt actually more comfortable doing those scenes because they were amongst the female crew, which was really, really lovely to hear.
I'm curious, as producers, how do you sort of choose your projects? Is it a script? Is it the person attached? Is it, you know, a little bit of both, or maybe you just go by a case-by-case basis on what speaks to you? Because if you're gonna invest your time and energy in something, I imagine you have to really love it.
Yeah. I think for me and for, you know, Cecil, we just try and find, you know, what's the core, you know, in terms of holding a mirror up to us and humanity and how we live and how we are as humans. Like what is this adding to the universe? And I think that, you know, there's a line towards the end of the film, which is, you know, I want our kind of different, and to celebrate a world where difference is celebrated and embraced and is part of, you know, love, I think is a really strong and important message. And I think that was how we really cemented our love for Ammonite when we read that first draft. And I think it's finding those kind of emotional and human journeys through, you know, through storytelling, because otherwise it's way too hard. Putting films and everything together, you've really got to be passionate about what, you know, what you're putting out into the world,
and also be passionate about the filmmaker and how that filmmaker wants to make something. And collaboration is very important to me as a producer, and I want to support an environment that is collaborative and respectful. And yeah, and I hope I can achieve that on everything I make. But yeah, that's really important as well.
You know, they say necessity is the mother of all invention, and especially working on independent film, I'm curious if there was anything maybe you wanted to do that you weren't able to, and you had to get creative, and it actually came up with a better solution that worked better for the film.
I think there was probably, you know, there's a sort of sense, I think, as you make a second feature, that you've somehow got to, you know, create scenes with a kind of sense of too much going on and not about the simplicity of the actors and the emotions, and you're sort of wowed by lots of sort of flashing lights, but it's about thing. And I think that one of the things that Francis just held really dear was about how this film was about leaning into this relationship, and also almost like hearing the silences in some ways, to have your heart in your mouth about whether these two people were going to find love with each other, and to do that in a beautiful way, with not, you know, the score from Dustin and Volker's really beautiful, but it's sparingly placed in a really meaningful way. And I think that kind of delicate side of things was a Francis very clear vision, and I think gave the film its real unique voice, I think. And it can get quite busy when you're starting to do period drama, so it's not so much that we couldn't do that. It was just that the aesthetic was so precise with Frances that I think and I think that's worked.
Yeah, it was about reminding ourselves that it's about the psychology of these characters, but these characters happen to be in period dress in 1840s Lyme Regis, and especially when we are on a budget, you know, there were some limitations, but as long as we focused in on the psychology, then I felt as if we never compromised the story, never.
And finally, for anyone who's an aspiring producer or maybe even a working producer, is there any advice that you wish you had been given when you were starting out, just about surviving this business? You know, the kind of temperament you need to have, just something you wish you'd known early on?
Oh, that's a good question.
Befriend other producers.
Sorry?
Befriend
other? Oh, yeah.
Befriend other producers, because I think when you start off, I think producers can be quite territorial, and you feel as if they're your enemy, and you're entering a competitive space. But actually, you so need those producers, and you need that support system. You need to tap into their knowledge and advice. So yeah, I would befriend other producers and not treat them as if they're your enemy.
I think also, you know, building off of that, we're a company that was started with 2 producers. I think having the ability to pick up the phone to another producer or be in partnership with another producer and be able to say, this happened to me today, and scream a little bit,
Yeah.
and then be able to make a plan about how you solve it together is really important, because it can be a lonely business with a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. So I think that having that dynamic and supportive network, I think is really essential. And as Fodhla says, not something that always happens. So you know, you need someone to be able to speak to in this business and share the pressure and work out plans together. It's better that way, I think.
And someone who really probably understands what you're going through too is nice. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think it's good advice for any business, actually, now that I think about it. Well, I want to thank you so much for being here today. I want to remind everyone that the film is currently available in limited release, and it will be available in premium on demand as of December 4th. It's such a beautiful movie. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you everyone for watching at home.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.